Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the nation on the occasion of the 71st Independence Day today. Prime Minister Modi first paid tributes to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, at Rajghat this morning before heading to the Red Fort, where he unfurled the tricolour. This was Prime Minister Modi's fourth Independence Day address. Prime Minister Modi, who reached the 17th century monument to give his customary Independence Day speech, received a guard of honour from a contingent of the Army, Navy, Air Force and Delhi Police. The Prime Minister then unfurled the national flag amid a 21-gun salute. Prime Minister Modi had asked all Indians to share their ideas for his speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort and received over 8,000 messages. The Prime Minister spoke on varied issues ranging from farmers' issues, GST, demonetization, terrorism and triple talaq. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Independence Day address of the Prime Minister. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Tandon, senior journalist, A.K. Bhattacharya, editorial director, Business Standard, Professor Rajvir Sharma, RSS thinker, and Suresh K. Goel, former diplomat. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Tandon, I'd like to begin with you. The Independence Day address started with, an address to the Gorakhpur incident, and that was truly unfortunate. It started on a somber note as a result of that, didn't it?
Of course, not only the Gorakhpur incident, but also the floods in different parts of the country and the sufferings of the people due to that. But basically, this year's independence speech, in the last 3 years occasions, he has been announcing his schemes, the projects which his government intends to go for. And in this particular speech, he has given a sort of a report card, the progress on each and every issue which he has been promising the people, particularly from the ramparts of the Red Fort. And that is why the detailed report card on the economic issues, on the money matters, and also health, education. So that was major part of the Prime Minister's speech. The second was, he started from his Man Ki Baat and then followed it up for the Quit India Movement speech, where he identified 6 problems, evils, challenges before the society, and elaborated on that, what more needs to be done in that respect. But one common factor of the Prime Minister's address was that he wants to accomplish everything by carrying all sections of the society along and indicating repeatedly that nothing can be done by government alone. And government's participation is very important. And he cited the instance of his cleanliness drive, Swachh Bharat, where people have joined it. And if you remember in the Quit India Movement speech, he said the movement which was launched by Gandhiji became people's movement. And similarly, he wants all his promises, his pledges and his programs to become people's movement.
That is something that the President also spoke about during his address.
Last night the President also spoke about it. So therefore, but two striking features of this speech were, of course, Ambassador Goel may be able to throw more light on that, was that it didn't mention Pakistan by name. It didn't mention even China by name. Whereas yesterday, the Pakistan Prime Minister, in his Independence Day speech, literally tried to provoke India by saying that India has expansionist plan, India is not ready to have talks with us. Prime Minister did not respond. So that is one remarkable thing. The second thing was, by talking about terrorism, the menace of terrorism, and how the Indian armed forces, security forces are tackling it, he has also sent a message across the border that we are challenging, we are facing this challenge, but with determination we are fighting it out also.
Sure.
So by not naming Pakistan, he has sent a very clear message to them in respect of both from cross-border terrorism and also preparedness of our armed forces.
Indeed.
Another important issue was his comment or support to triple talaq.
Sure. That's something that we'll talk about at length in due course of time of the program. But, Ambassador Goel, since Mr. Tandon brought up Pakistan and China, then I have to immediately bring you in. In 2016, during his Independence Day speech, the Prime Minister spoke at length as far as foreign policy was concerned. This time around, not touching upon foreign policy at all. Was there a reason behind that?
Well, let me first of all say that I don't think that we can say that he didn't touch on the foreign policy. What we can say, as Mr. Tandon said, is that he did not name any particular country. But I think in the speech he has touched on several important issues relating to the foreign policies. And if I can count, they are basically security, a comprehensive security in terms of both the borders, energy security, the development, the progress, talking about the cyber security, etc., and terrorism. Without saying where it is happening or not happening from, he has highlighted the concerns that our country is facing on account of these foreign policy priorities. And I think it was a very wise thing. Unlike last year the circumstances were very, very different. It was a very wise thing
so clearly,
not to mention the country's
clearly
name.
there is a change in approach. What has prompted this?
There is a change in approach in the sense of not specifically naming the countries.
Yes.
And I think the simple reason for that, I can only guess, really is because that actually is not really productive approach in terms of meeting our own objectives. Our own objectives are really addressing the issues. Where they're coming from is a different matter, really. Now, for example, I mean, like you mentioned China. What purpose it would have served for us to mention Doklam or China or what is happening in Ladakh, etc., etc.? It won't really go anywhere at all. We need to find a solution. The EM has said very often, our entire establishment is saying that we need to work through diplomatic means to find a solution.
Diplomatic and peaceful means.
Peaceful means.
Sure.
Similarly, in the case of Pakistan, we have underlined all the time again that while we'll meet all the incursions, the ceasefire violations and everything, the terrorism, appropriately through means, whatever is necessary, surgical strike, but eventually, everybody says that eventual solution lies in talks.
Indeed, indeed.
Just one comment.
Yeah.
See, in respect of terrorism, he made it very clear that on this issue, the entire world is backing India. We are not alone in fighting terrorism, but the entire world is along with India.
And this is something that Prime Minister has raised and spoken about everywhere he's travelled as well. And that has been a connecting cord between India and the other countries as well.
So I would just like to mention that I think in that sense, it was a very, very wise step and very mature thing to do to talk about the issues rather than countries.
Okay, fair enough. You know, Professor Sharma, Mr. Tandon raised the issue of Quit India movement, and that's something that the Prime Minister has been speaking at length over the last few days. We saw in his previous month, his monthly Mann Ki Baat address, he spoke about it. He spoke about in Parliament as well, and during his Independence Day address as well, he's spoken about the Quit India movement.
Well, I think the Prime Minister has referred to many issues and many problems in his speech. Quit India movement was a movement of a different nature. And what he wanted to say that if India takes a resolve, then it can solve any problem of whatever kind it may be. And he says that after the resolution of 9th August 1942, Quit India movement, as we know, or August Kranti, as we refer it to, he said that once we decided to push the Britishers out of India, the Quit India movement in fact succeeded because we were all one, and there were no differences whatsoever amongst the people of the country. But the most important thing is that he tried to link things of unity and the kind of togetherness with the issue of divisive forces. And he said that like Quit India movement, we also shall have to start a new movement where communalism should have no place to live in India, where casteism should have no place to live in India, or where poverty should have no place to live in India. Or he said that if something has to go from India, it is basically the questions of nepotism. He referred to it, and he said that corruption is one of the major problems, and therefore we will have to usher in a new movement where corruption should be fought, and where poverty should be fought.
Indeed. You know, Mr. Bhattacharya, I'd like to bring you into the picture now, because the Prime Minister spoke at length for, you know, he pitched for a new India as well. What is the Prime Minister's idea of a new India, and has he set himself a 5-year goal to achieve some of these visions and make these visions a reality as far as a new India is concerned?
Well, yes, I think, you know, from that perspective, I would say that this is a speech that touches upon all the right buttons. and launches the Prime Minister for his electoral assault in 2019 with this new slogan of the New India. It is important what he identifies as the challenges for realizing this New India. He talks about housing, he talks about electricity, he talks about water, he talks about eliminating terrorism, eliminating casteism, eliminating communalism, and eliminating corruption. And he wants to create opportunities for youth and women. So I think if you look at the New India paradigm or the New India goal, all the right buttons have been touched, but he doesn't touch upon two critical issues, which is what needs to be done on healthcare. And it is a little odd that he started his speech with the Gorakhpur tragedy, but in his New India thing, healthcare and education, they don't figure. So I would imagine this is a work in progress. Maybe the full-scale vision is yet to come out. And in my view, the full-scale vision cannot but include, it has to include these two critical sectors on healthcare and education, particularly because he is talking about a new emphasis on the jobs field. We all know how jobs creation have become a big challenge, and I sensed that in this speech he is probably trying to reorient the way the government wishes to see the challenge of job creation. He is now talking about, instead of job seekers, we need to get job givers.
Sure.
We want to have job creators. So I think he recognizes the huge challenge. If you look at his 3-point agenda before 2014, which was development infrastructure, second was black money corruption, third was jobs. I think the first two, he has made some progress. But the third one, the jobs challenge, is a big challenge that, going by the latest data on the CMI survey, 1.5 million people are moving out of the jobs situation. I think here is a clear shift probably that one notices, that the emphasis on the self-employed sector is perhaps that one will see as the new challenge and the new element in the New India vision.
Right.
One final point.
Yes.
He talks about a lot about people who are 18 years of age.
He said 2018 is going to be a very crucial year for
and
India.
I think that's replete with the electoral implications. And I think in 2 years' time they will be 20, and a large, I think I don't exactly recall the year number, but at least some few million new voters would join the electorate. And I think it's a very astute move on the part of the Prime Minister to have touched upon this agenda of 18 plus people, and they should be made part of this campaign for the New India.
Indeed. Two things that I want to raise with you, Mr. Tandon, that Mr. Bhattacharya spoke about. Since we are here on the misses as such, what is it that you believe that the Prime Minister could have spoken about but did not speak about in his address today? And also 2018, a crucial year, is what the Prime Minister has said. Why is it going to be crucial, and what do we get out of it as far as the Prime Minister's short-term goals are concerned?
See, before I come to your point, his formulation in condemning violence of all form, I think that was very pertinent issue. And he also said that violence in the name of faith is not acceptable. Violence of any form is not acceptable in a democracy. And while saying so, he touched upon violence of different kinds which we are witnessing today. Violence in the valley, violence in the Naxal affected areas, violence in the name of faith, as he has said. And also,
talking about the valley, I'm sorry to cut you short, talking about the valley, one thing that stood out for me was the fact that he said, I'm looking for a peaceful solution in Kashmir, and that's what all of us want, don't we?
Certainly, his comment on Kashmir was very important, because he said neither bullet nor abuses are going to solve the problem. What we need is to embrace the young people, the people of Kashmir. He said, in fact, he invited those misguided youth to come back to the mainstream. And he said some of them are doing it also. So it was a very conciliatory approach in terms of solving the Jammu and Kashmir problem. He didn't touch about the Jammu and Kashmir problem vis-a-vis our neighbor, but internal situation in Jammu and Kashmir Valley, particularly reaching out to the youth and also offering them to come back to the mainstream. Everything can be sorted out. We want to embrace them. No abuses, no bullet. So also in his formulation about violence, the violence of Jammu and Kashmir was also part of it. So I think condemning violence, also asking people to abjure violence, even if it is in the name of the faith. I think it's a very bold statement which he has made in the context of some of the recent developments. So the point you asked was about, I'm forgetting what.
No, I asked you, so since we were on, some of the issues that he probably did not touch upon that needed immediate attention, can you list out those?
Well, while referring to Gorakhpur incident, it could have been elaborated. He could have been more forthcoming in explaining, because he did touch upon the health issues. But shortage of drugs, medicines, etc. He touched upon the facilities which we need, a more basic health approach. But I think it would have been too much to comment upon an incident which has taken place just 2 days ago, and all the facts are not known. So maybe some people felt that starting his speech from Gorakhpur, he should have elaborated it. But I personally feel it is better to wait for the facts. Right. And I don't think there is, see, in his last Mann Ki Baat, the Prime Minister has said, I will try to make my speech short, which he has tried as compared with the last year's speech. And his rounding up started after 1 hour, but it took 10 minutes to wind up. But I think in 1 hour or 50 minutes time, and you have to give your report card, we have to also list the priorities, the challenges, and also invite people. I think if you count the number of times he used the word 125 crore people have to work together, that was the message.
Sure.
That collectively we have to achieve everything.
Indeed. Ambassador, talking about Kashmir, we might all want a peaceful solution, and that's how we want it to be taken forward as well. But when we have a third party indirectly involved in everything that's happening in the valley, how is it that we can achieve a peaceful solution?
Frank, I found that your earlier questioning was very attractive. So very briefly, let me address that part first. I mean, as to what more he could have said on the foreign policy. I really wish that the Prime Minister, because at the moment, the importance of India lies in its emerging role, globally and regionally. I wish if he had talked about the Act India policy and the neighborhood policy referring to what we aim to achieve, it would have been a very good message in terms of what India aspires to be at the global stage. Very briefly, that remark. Second thing about Jammu and Kashmir. We need to look at the problem in two segments, not necessarily separated, but two segments. I have maintained this even earlier, that Pakistan is one part of it. But the other more important part of it really is our own internal security mechanisms. Unless we are able to address our own internal security mechanisms, Pakistan or the terrorism across the border will always remain the threat. We can deal with the terrorism across the border through our armed forces, etc., etc. But our internal security, our internal matters, we have to resolve through our entire means of what we find there, how to start the political process in Jammu and Kashmir. So I think we have to continue to deal with it in the two different manners, guard our borders, guard against any incursions, guard against any intrusion of terrorists from across the border. And at the same time, as the Prime Minister said, we want a peaceful solution, peaceful process in Jammu and Kashmir. And I think in that sense, engaging the people who are actually supporting the peace there, civil society, is important.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Professor Sharma, there were contentious issues that were touched upon as well. Some issues in the past that the Prime Minister has been accused of not speaking up about. For instance, communalism, casteism, triple talaq. He spoke about empowering the Muslim women as well. So even those issues were touched upon today.
I think, Mr. Pereira, you are right. I mean, this time, the Prime Minister has deliberately chosen those challenges which are troubling the mind of the people in India, within India. So he has addressed mostly the domestic challenges and domestic issues, because I think he has been speaking quite extensively earlier in his speeches everywhere about the foreign policy and also about the security issues. This time he chose deliberately the domestic issues. For example, he referred to the problems of the farmers, and he said that by 2022 his government intends to double the income of the farmers, and therefore the questions of agrarian backwardness and agrarian poverty, he has tried to give some kind of a new interpretation. Similarly, the questions of the corruption, he laid emphasis on this very much, and I think he dealt with the problem of corruption more extensively than many other things. And he said that the corruption is one which is eating into the vitals of Indian democracy and Indian governance. Even economy is being badly impacted by corruption.
You know, on that note, the black money holders were not spared yet again this time in the Prime Minister's address.
And of course, he said it so openly, and he said that, you know, the cell companies, almost 3 lakh cell companies, he said, were created by the corrupt business and industry. And he said that out of these 3 lakh cell companies, 1.7 lakh companies have been identified and de-recognized, or what you can say dismantled in a way. Similarly, he says that so far as the recovery of the black money is concerned, he said 1.25 lakh crore of rupees after demonetization have been recovered. And similarly, he gave so many kind of data which clearly established that the government is very serious about fighting corruption and the evil of corruption.
Sure, true. You know, Mr. Bhattacharya, as an economic journalist, someone who follows the economy very, very closely and who's had several years of experience in doing just that, what are the economic takeaways from the Prime Minister's address?
Well, number one, there's a clear message on GST that further reforms are on the cards. And this also, in a sense, it is an admission that the GST that was rolled out from July 1 had many imperfections. And the Prime Minister said it very openly that more reforms will take place in this GST, which I would take as the issue about the multiplicity of rates, the many exemptions, and the many implementation, the rollout, the usual, the obvious, the glitches, they will be ironed out. So which is a positive sign, and that the Prime Minister is completely seized on this issue, and more GST reforms are on the cards. That's number one. Number two is the government is once again focused on both bringing large chunks of the economy within the tax net. India is definitely, if you look at the tax to GDP ratio, there is a lot of room for India to catch up with. So I think this effort, if this effort results in some more action in getting more people under the tax net, not only will more resources will be available for giving the boost the investments in the economy. So I personally feel that GST reforms and the government's efforts at widening the tax net are two clear signals that are available from the Prime Minister's speech this year. And in addition, the third one, which I have referred to in my earlier intervention, is on how the jobs challenge is being reformulated as the challenge of not meeting the job seekers' demand, but creating more job givers, which is emphasis more on self-employed people. So, and I think it is it's a pragmatic move, because creating jobs in today's situation and environment where artificial intelligence and the digital spread is becoming very, very difficult for both the government sector as well as the private sector to create as many jobs as they are required. So therefore, the government must actually attempt this attempt to face this challenge by not necessarily only creating jobs, but also creating opportunities for people to give jobs.
Fair enough. You know, I've got time for just one final comment on the program. So, Mr. Tandon, any political takeaways from the Prime Minister's address?
I think one political takeaway is support to triple talaq. He said it's taking shape of a movement among Muslim women, and government will extend its full support. I think it's a very clear message. But, you know, digitalization, that was also one key aspect of his speech. You know, cashless society, more and more use of skill development, and also, you know, calling upon the youth to go for digitalization. I think that was also one important segment which appeals to the youth. But as far as the political aspects are concerned, I think his focus on corruption and job creation, as you already said. See, corruption is a very important message. If we remember, on the eve of the 2014 election, corruption was a big issue. Anna Hazare's movement, subsequently Baba Ramdev's call for ending corruption, black money.
Does it continue to be a big political game changer, Mr. Tandon?
Of course, and that is why he spoke extensively about his attack on corruption as well as black money.
Sure.
So because people were expecting 3 years after his government, what the government has done on the front of black money, because it was a political issue. And it is, as you rightly said, it's going to be a political issue. So he gave statistics about the black money and the number of people who are now paying tax. Also, he thanked the people for their support to demonetization and GST. So I think these were the issues which really concern common man, and people were expecting some kind of a statement of account from the Prime Minister, which he has given with full statistics.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, on that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture, because we're completely out of time today. I'd like to thank Ashok Tandon, A.K. Bhattacharya, Rajvir Sharma and Suresh K. Goel for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. And we here at Rajya Sabha Television would like to wish all our viewers a very happy Independence Day. May God bless us all.